For decades, Africa was expected to follow rules written elsewhere, politically, economically, and strategically. But something has changed. Across the continent, governments are quietly pushing back, rewriting alliances, and rejecting instructions they once accepted without question. If you want to understand where global power is really heading, subscribe now, because this shift is happening fast, and most people aren't paying attention. The old order. For much of the post-colonial era, Africa operated within a Western-designed framework. Political legitimacy flowed through Western institutions. Economic stability depended on international lenders. Security was outsourced to foreign militaries. Aid, trade access, and diplomatic recognition often came with conditions, from governance models to economic reforms. This system wasn't accidental. It was built after independence, reinforced during the Cold War, and normalized through global institutions. For years, many African leaders accepted it as the price of stability. But stability never fully arrived. Disappointment and fatigue. By the 2010s, frustration had spread across much of the continent. Despite decades of aid and partnerships, insecurity worsened in regions like the Sahel. Infrastructure gaps remained, youth unemployment soared, resource wealth failed to translate into prosperity. Foreign military missions promised security but delivered mixed results. Economic programs demanded sacrifice without visible long-term gain. For many Africans, the message was clear. Following Western rules did not guarantee progress. That realization marked the beginning of a quiet break. The Sahel as the turning point. Nowhere is this shift clearer than in the Sahel. Countries like Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger experienced repeated crises, insurgencies, weak governance, and loss of territorial control. When civilian governments failed to restore order, military leaders stepped in and refused to follow the usual script. Instead of rushing back to Western-approved transitions, they rejected sanctions, challenged ECOWAS authority, formed their own alliance, the Alliance of Sahel States. For the first time in decades, African governments openly chose regional solidarity over Western approval. This was not just rebellion, it was a recalculation. New partners, new leverage. Africa's shift away from Western rules doesn't mean isolation, it means options. Countries are diversifying partnerships, engaging China, Russia, the Gulf states, Turkey, and others, without committing to a single power bloc. This multipolar approach gives African states leverage they never had before. Instead of accepting fixed conditions, they negotiate. Instead of aligning automatically, they choose selectively. The West is no longer the only gatekeeper, and Africa knows it. Sovereignty over symbolism. Another major change is how legitimacy is defined. In the past, international recognition mattered more than domestic support. Today, many African leaders prioritize control of territory, visible security gains, resource sovereignty, national pride. This shift explains why Western criticism no longer carries the same weight. Leaders now calculate legitimacy internally first, externally second. Whether this approach succeeds or fails remains uncertain, but the mindset has clearly changed. Why the West is struggling to adapt. Western governments are accustomed to setting rules, not renegotiating them. Sanctions, diplomatic pressure, and aid suspensions once worked. Now they often backfire. When African states find alternatives, pressure loses effectiveness. The West is discovering something uncomfortable. Influence without results is no longer persuasive, and Africa is no longer waiting for permission to move on. The risks of the new path. This shift is not without danger. Rejecting Western frameworks does not automatically produce better governance. Military rule carries risks. New partnerships can create new dependencies. Africa's challenge is not just independence, it is accountability. Breaking old rules only matters if new systems deliver real improvements. What this means for the world. Africa is not leaving the global system, it is renegotiating its role within it. The continent is asserting that it will no longer follow rules simply because they are inherited, imposed, or enforced from outside. This is not a temporary phase, it is a structural shift, and it signals the emergence of a more fragmented, multipolar world, where influence must be earned, not assumed. Africa is no longer following Western rules because those rules no longer reflect African realities. What comes next will shape global politics for decades. The question is no longer whether Africa will chart its own path, but whether the world is ready to adjust. For serious analysis of global power shifts beyond headlines, subscribe to the channel. Because the future of geopolitics is being decided right now, quietly and far from the spotlight.